Hello everyone, today we are taking a look at a brand new company to the FPV space, specifically the micro space, YMZFPV, and they have this little quad called the Lightning 1. Now unfortunately for you digital flyers, right now this is only available in analog, but I think a fair number of us still fly analog relatively regularly. Myself, I fly analog probably 60 to 70% of the time still. So if you like analog and you like micros, let's take a look. So what YMZFPV is, I would call them as an assembler rather than a manufacturer. Sure, they made the aluminum mount, which I believe that is aluminum, but they're using parts from other, well-known vendors. The primary being the Happy Model X12. This particular version is Express LRS. You can get it with TBS Crossfire, but TBS stuff has been pretty hard to get a hold of, so Express LRS is probably the way to go if you can. This has the 12 amp ESC, and you can see my little cube antenna right there, as well as the 400 milliwatt VTX. They're using the 1003 RC in power. 10,000 kV motors is what they have printed on their website, but to me, in my eyes, zoomed in here with the camera, that looks like 14,000 kV. So that's a question I've asked. And on those motors are the Gemfan Tri-Bladed 2023 props. FPV camera is the Caddx Ant. Flight controller has the 90-degree angled sort of connectors on it. The carbon fiber has got this coating all over it. That's why when it comes to carbon fiber, I don't really read the weave, because the weave can be any old which way. It doesn't tell you anything about the actual layering of the carbon fiber. And this one, for some skinny arms, it's pretty stiff. Pretty happy with this carbon fiber. There is no motor wire tape. If you're familiar with the channel, I oftentimes talk about motor wire tape, and in this case, I think it's especially useful. That's something else I think they should do. The battery mount is 3D printed. There is two, and I did fly it both ways with one, as you see here, and two, one in the front, one in the back. And I found that the battery, it held better with two, but you can fly it each way. In the flight footage you'll see, I did use this G&B 550 milliamp red labeled 2S battery. The Lightning one with one battery holder is 47.8 grams. If we add the secondary battery holder, it weighs 48.62 grams. And with that 550 milliamp 2S G&B red labeled battery, it is 77.38 grams. Carbon fiber is 2 millimeters thick. This aluminum up here is 4 millimeters thick. Arms look to be 5 millimeters wide. And motor post to motor post, I'm getting about 92 millimeters. And if you're comparing it to my favorite 2S micro, which is a build that I did 3 years ago now, I think, it weighs a fair bit more. The Rocket Race comes in at almost 35 grams. The metal uprights weigh 8.14 grams. If you choose to remove some of the extraneous pieces, which aren't entirely necessary, but necessary in one particular case we'll discuss later, you can save 3.41 grams. You're not going to save all that weight. Again, we'll explain that later. It comes with a Phillips and a hex-headed screwdriver. I got some extra props, but it's hard to tell if you'll get extra props from what they say on the website, because this was sent for review. But I'll ask them to send at least one full set. And I already mentioned, but you do get two battery holders. YMZFPV is a new company, and because it's a new company, I sent them a number of questions a few days ago, not that long ago, and I know that they have read those questions, and they did respond saying that they would get back to me. A lot of my questions were about what should you expect. Warranty, implementing that warranty, purchase, how long it's going to take to get to you, and they have some of that covered now on their website, but we'll go over that in this video as well. By the way, they don't have a support section populated with the diff and dump, so if you're looking for that, the PID tune of this I think is pretty good. That will be linked in a folder down in the video description, but if you're watching this way down in the future, go ahead and go to their page. Hopefully they have their own diff and dump for this and any other quad that they might come up with. So if you're interested in this, I'll have those responses as well as links to where you can look at this in all of its glory down in the video description and the first pinned comment. Okay, so let's start with some weather data. 92 degrees, according to what I looked up. It seemed like it was cooler than that. But we have a little bit of wind, but it's pretty mild. 7 to 9 miles an hour on the wind. I could feel the wind with its direction being out in the yard because I did go crash a number of times on this particular day. This is actually one of my last 2 days flying it. If you're familiar with the channel, you know that I fly these things. I tend to fly them over the course of a week to 10 days, so I get a bunch of different flights in them. So I can get comfortable with them, so I can give a good sort of analysis of my opinion on the quad, as well as some reliability of the overall quad. You know, without some crashes, what sort of review is it? And I did have plenty of crashes, and I'll have a short crash reel. It's kind of tedious to pick out the crashes, but I will have a crash reel here at the end of the video. And one of the things that surprised me out of the box at this weight with 1003 motors, I did not have high hopes, and I was pleasantly surprised. That move around the tree, that whirlybird thing, that wasn't my best. But we're going with this flight because I've already got it ready to go. I have tried these motors. I tried these motors on 3 different props. Some Gemfan Lumineer bi-blades that are 2-inch, these Gemfan 23 props, as well as some, I think they're 55mm press-on props that were bi-blades. And I just could not get a good tune out of it. So kudos to YMZ for doing something I couldn't. Some of you are probably going, well, you can't tune anyways. And, well, I wouldn't claim to be a great tuner, but I've been successful in the past. But it flies really nicely. And at this weight, you get that extra huckability. Of course, it decreases your flight time. It means you have to bank more on hard speed turns. But you get that huckability of flicking it over something, and if you fly like kind of what I do around that tree that kind of hangs horizontally, or you do punch outs like I do around the chimney or something like that, that huckability comes into play there. And I sure hope they stick with these 14,000 kV motors, because if they go drop down to 10,000 kV, well, you'll get more flight time. That top-end speed or top-end pop that you'll have, when I do hear back from them on that subject, I will certainly let you know with the information down in the video description with a link to the product, as well as the first pinned comment, because I think the questions I pose to them are going to be important, because we want to make sure that the company's going to be around and we can go to them reliably, and they have filled out a little bit of information on the warranty and support areas, so we'll go over that here after a bit. But again, at this weight with these motors don't save any weight over 1102, so don't be swayed by that. It's just 1102 motors. Quite honestly, it looks like they've fallen out of favor for some manufacturing reason. We just don't see a lot of them. Yeah, you can go find them, but getting 1102 motors, there's just not a lot of them out there. So some of these companies have been going to 1002 and 1003 motors. So something to consider, but we do all the typical things so you can diagnose the PID tune. This also has the opportunity, in my opinion, to be a top-mounted battery. So if you like micros with a battery on the top of the quad, I think we can do that just by removing a few simple pieces, and we'll go over that here at the desk. I do have a crash reel, if I didn't mention that already, that will be showing back at the desk as well.
Flies.
We've ended our flight. 304 on the flight time. Battery comes in at 3.55 volts per cell.
Get off of me. They're everywhere.
Okay, so the first thing I want to cover is we do need to have some sort of motor wire tape. So one of the things they do to make it look nice is they twist it like here, and you'll kind of notice on this one and this one, I took at least one of those twists out so that the motor's connectors would stay in there more appropriately. What happens when you don't have one of these connected is one motor doesn't spin up, and then if you're like me and you're on the table and you arm, you just fall off the table because one motor's not spinning. You can't fly with 3 motors. Something else that I found was that if you look here on the bottom, I have this particular motor has different screws. Now, I had screws on hand. These are M1.4, and I believe they're 3 millimeters thick. These might be 4 millimeters thick. I did have 2 of the screws that came out. I liced them, and as this motor was loosening up, I had some runaway issues. At first, I didn't know why it was. I had been on many flights over several days, and I didn't notice any issues. And all of a sudden, one day I go out to fly, and I got runaway issues. So eventually, I figured it out that I had lost some motor screws, and this motor was actually just kind of out here flopping around. So I did ask them to send some extra motor screws, as well as the screws that go to mount the everything else besides the motors, because I did lose one screw. Can we see it right down in there? You can see where one screw head is missing from this piece that holds the antenna holder. I did lose one of those screws as well when I was out flying. So some extra screws would be necessary. Now, I showed you where you could save some weight, and by removing this piece, this aesthetic piece here, and you can see it's kind of gnarled up from my crashes, and then this antenna as well as the spoiler. I think they all kind of serve a purpose that's functional. One would be to protect the antenna from getting too scrunched, but you can see mine is scrunched up a little bit already. But I think we could just run the antenna out back, and we could use the old zip tie and shrink wrap. So run a zip tie around here, maybe even pin down your battery lead, which would be a good idea as well. And then just have the antenna sticking out. This piece or this piece, one of those 2 pieces you're going to need in order to hold these 2 pieces kind of together, to keep them from splitting apart or keep them from bearing down on the carbon fiber when you do have one of those sideways crashes where it catches one of these pieces. So we're going to have to not be able to save all that weight, but we can get rid of these fins, or you can get rid of the spoilers by, you know, snipping those off with your wire snips. I think those would work. You may have to do something else a little bit more creative, because it's going to get tough to get down in here with your wire snips. So those are things that I thought they could save some weight. Now, obviously, this particular one doesn't have HD. We don't have a walk snail version or an HD0 version. I do think with a slight modification, they could come forward. They may be playing it conservatively at this time because they are new. This is their first product to entry. They may be waiting to see, you know, how people feel about this particular quad. How does, you know, sales go? Because that's always king when it comes to products and them being continued to be manufactured. Again, with the build, some tape on here. That's one thing I suggest. If you don't have some tape, I would suggest you get some. Especially with micros, it's really, really handy. That tape on here will help keep the motor wires in my estimation. I did mention it briefly, but this battery lead, you know, this, I talk about this all the time. We need to secure this down. How I would do it would be to run a zip tie through there and then zip tie the battery lead down to this piece of carbon. You're probably going to have to take the canopy pieces apart because the antenna is up here and the camera's plugged in. You'll probably have to unplug the camera in order to get the canopy far enough away to where you can get the zip tie not around that capacitor. And it doesn't look like anything is printed on that capacitor, so I can't tell you what the microfarads or voltage of that is. If you couldn't tell, XT30 for your battery connection, and it is running Betaflight 4.4, and I've got the diff and the dump down in the video description down below. I think there's also an opportunity to just save overall weight or to really make a different style off of this one, and I haven't suggested them to YMZFPV yet. I do think they could make something a more traditional style of micro by, you know, taking this carbon fiber, modifying it a little bit to just not have the carbon fiber off the table end and the front end, and then not use the metal. It looks nice, but it's a weight penalty that we have. Well, I shouldn't say a weight penalty. It depends on how you want to fly. If you like the huckability of a micro having a few extra grams, which, what is it, like 8 or 9 grams more than this particular one, then you might enjoy that more. But they could make a light version and do something more like this by just modifying their carbon fiber and then having some sort of 3D printed canopy, you know, similar to this newbie drone canopy, and mount the camera up here. And they've got a whole new product to fit a different sort of market segment within the micros. It's an option that they can take advantage of, but they might not choose to. I don't know at this stage. If you couldn't tell already, you can see that the camera is nearly protected by these two metal pieces. If you look at it real closely, if I get it lined up, you'll see that the camera does bulge out of there ever so slightly, the roundness of that lens. And that's going to depend. So if you change the camera angle to where it doesn't match this angle, then you'll have an edge of the camera also exposed. But it is protected from the side, so sideways, if we hit there, we're going to have to get something right in that's narrow enough to get between this area, the props and whatnot, and get right on the camera before we actually have any sort of direct camera impact. You can see that I've got quite a bit of grass on mine and actually cleaned it up before I started recording here a little bit. Oh, their build. I should mention this. So they build them just like I do, thankfully. You put a nut on the bottom, and then you've got your gummy for your flight controller and your vibration dampening, and then a nut on top. That way you make sure that this nut is tight down, and then it holds stiff upright. That way you don't get a lot of flight controller flopping around, and it's isolated from there. You don't want to screw these nuts down too tight, though. You want these gummies to be movable, and you don't want these connectors resting on the carbon fiber. If you do that, it introduces any sort of vibrations you're getting from the prop and the motor up through the arm into the flight controller, and then you have PID tuning issues or just flight character issues. So the Lightning 1 comes in at $150 if you get the Express LRS edition, which is what I've got here. You can see they've also got a TBS Crossfire version that's available. That's quite a bit more expensive at $175. Looks like they're taking PayPal, and then if you scroll down, you can find essentially all the specs she gave you. They do offer simulators if you're looking for those, and a GPS. I have a couple of those sitting here, but I have not tried it. This is not the mini size GPS. This is the larger sized M10 that you can find from many resellers, but they also have two different simulators depending upon which one you need or choose. If you need one at all, they do have those available. Something else I wanted to highlight when we're here is they do have a refund policy. We need to make sure we pay attention to that and read the print. Basically, as I read through it, that you got to get in contact with them right away. They want a picture and they want to know what the problem is, and they do stress that they will work with you to take care of the defect before they return it, and that they would resend a new one out. The shipping policy, they state this stuff here, but one of the things that it takes 3 to 7 days after your product has been shipped. Average shipping time is 7 to 10 working days, so Monday through Friday, I presume, even though some people do work Saturdays and Sundays, that they will have tracking. And then down here a little bit lower, it talks about the shipping time depending upon where you're at. Canada, for some reason, even though we're both North America, takes longer than the U.S. Australia is a little bit closer, so therefore it's a little bit quicker, as well as the UK. I did ask more specifics about this. Again, I don't have those specific responses just yet. I will link the information down in the video description, as well as the first pinned comment. This is just a quick look at the dongles. They have 2 different dongles with XpressLRS, USB-A and C, and then the GPS module if you're interested in that. So if you look at the accessories tab, or the accessories page, it's pretty sparse, or I would say almost blank there. And that can be alarming for some. I did ask them about that as well. As their support section doesn't really have anything. If we go into the download section here, again, nothing here. I asked them about this as well, when they would have that updated, in order to provide you some assurance that you can get a new diff or dump, or you just want to look at the PID tune for this particular quad running these components. That is linked down in the video description. I will put both the diff and the dump into a Google folder and link it down below. Even if you look at the electronics or motors, you won't find anything here. Unfortunately, that means as of right now, you wouldn't have an option of ordering the Lightning 1 as well as any additional components you might want. Maybe you want to pick up a spare motor just in case. Nope, they're not listed, and I can't envision it staying this way. I'm hopeful by the time I release this video that this will be populated. It seems to be, in my opinion, it's just an oversight, because they've got all these parts. They're putting these quads together. They've got to have them. Why wouldn't they want to sell them to you too? Of course, these parts can be picked up from a whole bunch of different resellers. So if you were to buy a Lightning 1 and then you had an issue where you landed in some water, so you've got to replace your all-in-one, you could go anywhere and get the Happy Model X12, which is the exact flight controller they're using. But maybe you want to buy the frame. Maybe you want to buy the frame, I said. Come on, browser, let's go. Here we go, frame. No, you can't even buy the frame if you want to build it on your own. That is, again, I think something that they will remedy, because why wouldn't they want to sell you a frame if you want to build it? Maybe you like it. Maybe you like that spoiler on the back. Maybe you just like that sort of Tesla sort of design on this thing. Maybe. Why wouldn't they want to sell you one? What company doesn't want to sell us something? So that is my review of the YMZFPV Lightning 1. I was pretty impressed. As I said, it flies nicely. No, it's not as light as my Rocket Race or some of the others in the same category, but I'm really pumped that we continue to see the 2S 2-inch market develop, because I think that one is just a really good category for those that want to fly out in your backyard or a side yard, or you have a little park across the street and you want to stay small and relatively quiet. You don't want to get those big 5-inch prop noises, so you can avoid any sort of uncomfortable occurrences out while you're enjoying your time. And with some additional weight, you get some huckability to where you can flick it up over trees and it'll carry itself a little better. And it also fights the wind just a touch more, but it decreases our agility some, and it decreases our flight time some. At $150 from a new company, what do you all think? It's time for some input. This is a brand new company to FPV, and I'm sure they're going to be down there reading the comment section of this video. So if you have anything to say, if you keep it clean, I'll always leave it in there. So if you have anything to say, contribute to YMZ, other quads that you would like to see them possibly take on, leave it down in the comment section below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.